Everyone said Magnolia Ridge was the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. The lawns were clipped just right. The oak trees stood tall like guardians of peace, and neighbors waved with smiles rehearsed from real estate brochures. But peace is fragile. And sometimes the first crack in a perfect facade isn't a storm or a crime. It's a letter. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, wedged between a dog biscuit catalog and a charity gala invitation I'd never attend. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock, the kind of paper that tries to convince you it's important before you even open it. Across the top, in elegant swirling script, it read, Magnolia Ridge Homeowners Association. I remember holding it up, like a bad omen groaning theatrically across the kitchen island. Brace yourself, I told Sam. The fun police have sent another memo. My wife just smiled, arranging lilies in a vase, sunlight warming her face. She was used to my jokes about the HOA. She laughed like wind chimes in the summer breeze. What is it this time? She teased. Mailbox paint? Lawn height? But when I tore the flap and read the words inside, my smile vanished. It wasn't about mailboxes. It wasn't about lawns. It was about me, my life, my car, my dignity. The letter claimed that the Rolls-Royce Spectre parked in my driveway was not only unapproved, but unauthorized. The accusation was insane, that I, a 22-year-old kid, had stolen it, and that the HOA was pursuing legal action to forfeit the title. My own car, bought with my own hard-earned money, now branded as contraband in my own driveway. I laughed once, sharp, brittle, because what else do you do when the world suddenly tilts? Sideways? The signature at the bottom, written with smug flourish, carried a name I had heard whispered but never truly confronted. Karen Glass, President. When I handed the letter to Sam, her smile faded into disbelief, then anger. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that burns slow and deep. I knew that look. Sam was kind to everyone, but when someone came after the people she loved, it was like waking a sleeping dragon. She's suing us for our car, she said, her voice steady but her hands trembling. The words hung in the air like smoke. I told myself it had to be a mistake, a glitch in paperwork, something a 5-minute phone call would fix. Problems in my world were logical. Bugs in code. You identified the error, applied the patch, and the system corrected itself. But Magnolia Ridge wasn't logical. I dialed the HOA's office. The line dragged me through automated menus, each more hostile than the last, until finally, a voice answered cold, mechanical. I offered everything. The title, the bill of sale, my ID, proof stacked on proof. But the voice only repeated the script. All disputes must be addressed in writing. Miss Glass handles all legal matters personally. You will be notified of your hearing date. And then, click. Silence. That's when my confidence curdled into something else. This wasn't a glitch. This was personal. The irony cut like glass. The Spectre wasn't just a car. It was our promise. I bought it after years of sleepless nights, ramen dinners, and business deals that finally broke our way. It was more than success, it was freedom. The electric blue paint gleamed like a declaration. We made it, we survived, we earned this. And now someone I had never even met was trying to take it. I pulled up Karen Glass's name. The search didn't lead me to an office suite or even a rented corner in a corporate plaza. The Magnolia Ridge HOA, the fines, the accounts, the lawsuits, was being run from a desk in her own living room. My 5-minute fix had just turned into a war. 2 days later, another letter arrived. This time by certified mail. My driveway, they claimed, was unapproved surfacing. $5,000. My car, a silent electric marvel, was accused of noise pollution. $10,000. And the cherry on top, a $20,000 fine for operating a home-based business. The evidence? My car, $35,000 in fines, a threat to seize my vehicle, and the promise of a lien on my home. I stared at the paper, my pulse pounding. This wasn't rules anymore. It was extortion. Sam tried to stay calm, but that night I caught her on the patio, staring at the car in silence, wine untouched in her hand. I knew what she was thinking, how fragile everything was, how quickly a dream could be stripped away, not by thieves in the night, but by neighbors in broad daylight. I told her not to worry. I called a lawyer. Jessica was sharp, no nonsense. When I explained, she let out a low whistle. "This is abuse of power," she said. "Classic intimidation. She thinks you'll fold, pay up, make it go away, but if you fight, she can't win." I wanted to believe her. But belief cracked a little when the very next evening, two men in cheap security uniforms appeared at the edge of our lawn. No badges, no logos, just black shirts with the word compliance stitched in yellow. They stood there for hours, arms folded, staring at our house in silence. Karen's watchmen. Sam sat inside, pretending to read, but I could see her eyes darting to the window. And I realized, for the first time, that we weren't safe in our own home. That was when I felt it. Not fear, not anger, something colder. A steel resolve, because peace had been stolen from me, and I was going to take it back. Why does it always happen on a Saturday? You'd think weekends were safe, but the worst moments in life don't wait for weekdays. They arrive when you're least expecting them, like a storm breaking over a quiet afternoon. I was in the garage, polishing the Spectre. It was therapy for me, slow, deliberate movements, the hum of classic rock in the background. The electric blue finish gleamed under my hands like liquid glass. It was mine. It was proof of everything Sam and I had built together. And maybe that's why I didn't hear the cruiser roll up. The officer's voice startled me. "Sir, we got a call about a disturbance." I turned, rag still in my hand. "A disturbance?" He looked tired, uncomfortable, as though he already regretted being here. "Caller reported loud revving, possible street racing preparations, said you were laughing maniacally." I almost laughed right then. Laughing maniacally. The car was electric. It didn't even have an engine to rev. But before I could answer, another officer stepped forward. Older, harder. His tone snapped like a whip. "For officer safety, sir, turn around and place your hands behind your back." The words sank into me like ice water. My pulse hammered. This wasn't a warning. This wasn't a ticket. They were cuffing me. Cold steel bit into my wrists. The rag fell to the floor. And then, like a shriek through glass, her voice cut across the driveway. Karen Glass. She was standing across the street, phone raised high, live streaming to her online echo chamber. Her grin was stretched wide with triumph, her voice sharp as a blade. "See? I told you he stole it! I told you!" Neighbors peeked from their windows, phones appearing one by one, recording, whispering. My private humiliation became public spectacle. Karen drank it in, her shrill whoop echoing off the houses like sirens. 2 minutes. That's all it took for the truth to surface. The VIN came back, spotless. The title was mine. The younger officer removed the cuffs, his face taut with embarrassment. "Everything's in order, Mr. Reyes. Sorry for the hassle. Sorry for the hassle." As if being cuffed in my own driveway, under the eyes of my neighbors, was just a minor inconvenience. Across the street, Karen's smile cracked. Phones lowered, gasps turned to awkward silence. The spectacle she had staged for her victory had twisted into her defeat. I looked at the officer. "Let me guess," I said. "The caller was a Ms. Karen Glass?" His silence said everything. When the cruisers finally pulled away, Karen's voice was no longer triumphant. It was low, hissing, venomous. This isn't over, kid. Not by a long shot. That night, silence filled the house. Sam sat beside me, hands folded tight in her lap, eyes glistening with a fear she didn't want me to see. She had believed Magnolia Ridge was our escape, and now she had seen her husband cuffed like a criminal for washing his own car. I told myself to stay calm, to follow the lawyer's advice. Document everything, Jessica had said. Don't engage, stay low. But staying low felt like surrender. And surrender was not in my blood. I was a builder, a strategist, a man who had spent his life studying systems, finding weaknesses, dismantling threats. Karen thought she was dealing with some kid who'd roll over, write a check, and disappear. But she was wrong, because that night in the blue glow of my monitors, I stopped being a victim, and I started being a soldier. Sam stood in the doorway of my office, worry shadowing her face. What are you doing? I looked up from the screen, the servers humming like war drums behind me. I'm done playing defense, I said. This isn't a neighborhood anymore, Sam. It's a war zone, and Karen Glass has no idea who she's fighting. That was the moment everything changed. The moment I drew the line, Karen had weaponized paper. She had weaponized fear. She had even weaponized the police. But I had something stronger. Knowledge, skills, friends who lived in the digital shadows. I picked up the phone and called one of them. Rick, my oldest friend, my business partner, the kind of genius who saw the world in data streams. I told him everything. Every false fine, every letter, every humiliating scene. He didn't offer sympathy. He just chuckled softly and asked one question. So, when do we start? That's when my house stopped being a home and became a command center. Why do tyrants always believe no one is watching? Maybe it's because for so long, no one ever has. The very next night, my sanctuary became something else. Not a home, not a refuge, but a war room. I unpacked my commercial drone from its hard shell case. 12K camera, thermal payload, technically built for surveying property developments. Tonight, it had a new mission. I programmed its silent orbit high above Magnolia Ridge, legal airspace, my own property as launch point, nothing she could touch. From 500 feet up, Karen Glass's kingdom was nothing more than a grid of rooftops and heat signatures. Every car, every visitor, every late-night meeting, she had sent watchers to intimidate me. But she had no idea that an unblinking eye was now fixed on her. While I handled hardware, Rick dove into the HOA's digital skeleton. Their website was laughable, dead links, outdated templates, sloppy coding. But to Rick, it was a treasure chest with a busted lock. Within hours, he'd mapped every backdoor, every vulnerability. He didn't break in yet. He just took notes, like a safecracker memorizing tumblers before the spin. It's not a fortress, man, he muttered through our encrypted line, fingers flying. It's a garden shed with a dollar store padlock. Karen thought she ruled, with iron control. But in reality, her entire empire was duct tape and ego. The irony stung. She had power not because she was strong, but because everyone else had chosen silence. Fear had built her throne. Apathy had gilded it. Not anymore. And then came Derek. I should tell you about Derek. He lived 3 houses down, a retiree with binoculars always dangling from his neck, documenting birds and, according to rumor, UFO sightings. He saw me prepping the drone one afternoon and shuffled over, suspicion written all over his face. Is that one of them government chemtrail monitors? He asked, squinting at the sky. I paused. For a moment, I considered lying. But Derek wasn't dangerous. He was nosy. And sometimes nosy neighbors are exactly what you need. Something like that, I said. Just keeping an eye on the neighborhood. Security. His eyes lit up. Security? Good man, it's this Glass woman. She's out of control. Did you know she fined me $200 for wind chimes? Said they were auditory blight. Auditory blight. He shook his head, muttering like a man wronged by history itself. Had those chimes 20 years? 20. My late wife loved them, and she called them blight. His voice cracked, not with anger, but with hurt. And in that moment, I saw it, how deep Karen's cruelty went. She wasn't just issuing fines. She was erasing pieces of people's lives. And Derek remembered everything. He rattled off stories like an encyclopedia of injustice. The widow fined for a garden gnome. The young family threatened with lawsuits over a swing set. A pattern emerged. Not just me. Not just Derek. Everyone. Karen's empire was built on the broken spirits of her neighbors. And maybe that's why my pulse quickened when one night the drone caught something strange. 2 in the morning. A car pulled into Karen's driveway. It idled exactly 15 minutes. No one got out. Then it left. The next night, same car, same time, same ritual. At altitude, it was a faceless sedan, but Rick, with his digital sorcery, enhanced the plate, traced it through shadowy databases, and came back with a name, Martin Glass, her brother, a disgraced developer with a history of bankrupt projects and shady shell corporations. And here he was, visiting his sister in the dead of night. "What do you think?" I asked, staring at the footage. Rick's voice was grim. "I think we're pulling at a thread, and the whole sweater's about to unravel. We still didn't know what they were hiding. Not yet. But for the first time, we had proof that Karen wasn't just a power-drunk HOA queen with a taste for pink pantsuits. She was connected. She had allies in shadows. It was no longer just a petty war over a car. It was the beginning of a full-blown forensic investigation, and we had just found our first trail. Sometimes evil doesn't shout. Sometimes it whispers in numbers. Rick and I treated the HOA's digital system like a crime scene. Every byte of data was evidence. Every invoice a potential confession. Within 30 seconds, Rick cracked the password, Magnolia 123. That was it. The entire financial skeleton of Magnolia Ridge, guarded by the digital equivalent of a paperclip, and what we found made my stomach turn. Landscaping companies that didn't exist. Pool maintenance contracts for pools that weren't there. Checks, written to shell corporations with addresses that led to empty lots. Thousands, then tens of thousands, siphoned off with surgical precision. And every trail, every signature, every shadowy deposit led back to one name. Martin Glass. Karen's brother wasn't just a midnight visitor. He was her silent partner, her thief in the dark. Together, they had bled Magnolia Ridge of nearly $500,000, $500,000 stolen from widows and young families. $500,000 stolen under the guise of community fees, $500,000 built on lies. I remember leaning back in my chair, staring at the glowing monitor, my pulse hammering. I'd expected pettiness. I hadn't expected this. "She's not just a bully," I whispered. "She's a criminal." Rick nodded grimly on the other end of the line. "And if we don't take her down carefully, she'll bury you before you get a chance to breathe." For days, Sam and I lived in two realities. By day, we smiled, waved at neighbors, pretended we were untouched. By night, our living room became a bunker of coffee cups and hard drives, Rick's encrypted calls filling the air. We built a forensic audit tighter than steel, cross-referencing invoices, tracing every cent. It was airtight, enough to end Karen, forever. But something didn't fit. If this was just about money, why me? Why target my car, my house, my peace? Embezzlers thrive in shadows. Karen's crusade against me was loud, public, risky. The kind of attention real criminals avoid. That question gnawed at me. Why me? The answer came not in numbers, but in noise. Rick called it digital dumpster diving. Our rooftop mics picked up. More than crickets and passing cars. They caught fragments, Stray transmissions, ghostly signals bleeding into the night. Most of it was junk. Baby monitors, cordless phones, static. But buried in the noise was a pattern. Rick wrote an algorithm to sift, filter, isolate. He fed it Karen's voice, captured from her screaming at landscapers. And slowly a ghost emerged from the static. It was faint, warped, like a bad radio station. But it was them. Martin's voice first, slick, impatient. Is it handled? Is the tech brat getting the message? Then Karen, tight with frustration. He's not rolling over like the others. He called a lawyer. Silence. Then Martin again, colder this time. Then you need to push harder. The investors are getting nervous. They need that lot. Without it, the whole EV spa deal falls apart. EV spa. 2 words that made the world tilt. It hit me like a punch. The lawsuit against my car wasn't random. It was theater, a sick inside joke. The intimidation, the fake fines, the police call. Every move was designed for one purpose: to drive me out, to break me. To make me desperate enough to sell cheap. Because they didn't just want me gone, they wanted my land, my home. The ground Sam and I had chosen for our future, the oak trees we dreamed our kids would climb, reduced in their eyes to a construction site. They weren't just embezzling money, they were conspiring to bulldoze our lives. The $500,000 theft was only seed money. The real prize was the land beneath my feet, and suddenly, everything clicked. Karen wasn't a queen in her tiny HOA kingdom. She was a pawn, a predator on the surface, but underneath, she was working for something larger: investors, developers, her brother's crooked empire. The rage that hit me then wasn't hot. It wasn't wild. It was cold, pure, a glacier pressing against my chest, because now it wasn't just about me. It was about every neighbor she had terrorized, every widow she had fined, every family she had bullied. Sam listened to the recording in silence, her eyes fixed on the yard outside, the place she'd planted roses, the place she thought was safe. When it ended, she turned back to me, her face harder than steel. They want to bulldoze our home for a spa? Her voice trembled, then sharpened. Don't you dare tell me to be patient. We are past patient. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't about survival anymore. It was about war. We had the evidence, the invoices, the surveillance, the phone call, the blueprint of corruption. The question was no longer if we would act. It was how. What do you do when you finally hold the truth in your hands? Do you keep it hidden, safe, locked away like a secret weapon? Or do you load it into the chamber and pull the trigger for everyone to see? That night, sitting with Sam in the living room, I knew the choice. This isn't about us anymore, I said, pacing the floor. It's about all of them. Derek and his wind chimes, the family with the swing set, every person she bullied into silence. If we just take Karen down quietly, her system survives. Someone else takes her place. But if we burn it down in the way, open. If we expose everything, then maybe, just maybe, Magnolia Ridge can finally breathe again. Sam's jaw tightened. Her voice was calm, but every word carried steel. Then we expose it. No half measures. We don't just take her crown. We dismantle her throne. And with that, the plan was born. The annual HOA meeting was a week away. Normally, it was Karen's coronation. Her moment to stand at the podium, smug in her red blazer, rattling off rules and fines, bathing in the silence of a fearful crowd. But this year it would be her trial. Her stage would become her witness stand. Rick worked like a man possessed. He built what he called the Trojan horse, a single thumb drive loaded with everything: the fraudulent invoices, the shell corporations, the drone footage of Martin's midnight visits, and the damning audio of their whispered conspiracy. All encrypted, all packaged into a self-contained presentation ready to hijack the community center's projector system. Meanwhile, Derek became our unlikely herald. I told him only part of the truth. that I'd found financial irregularities and planned to reveal them. It was enough. He lit up like a man waiting his whole life for revolution. By the next morning, he was making calls, knocking on doors, whispering to neighbors who'd been wronged. "This year's meeting, don't miss it. He's going to expose her." And Magnolia Ridge began to stir. Quiet conversations turned into buzzing anticipation. Victims of Karen's pettiness found their courage again. A rebellion was brewing, not with weapons, but with whispers and righteous anger. But Karen wasn't blind. She felt the ground shifting beneath her heels. 2 nights before the meeting, her last desperate play arrived on my doorstep. Literally, the pounding on the front door shook the frame. I opened the monitor feed instead of the door and saw them, her 2 so-called compliance officers, dripping arrogance in their ill-fitting uniforms. They shouted through the night about a new violation: unauthorized exterior lighting. My porch bulb, they claimed, was the wrong Kelvin temperature. Sam looked at me, wide-eyed. "You're not seriously going to open the door?" "No," I muttered. And instead of answering their shouts, I tapped a control panel on my phone. A hiss, a rush, and then chaos. The high-pressure sprinklers I'd installed along the driveway roared to life, shooting jets of water from hidden nozzles in the flower beds. The 2 men shrieked as icy streams drenched them head to toe. They slipped, skidded, crashed to the concrete, sputtering like drowned rats. Their authority washed away in seconds, reduced to 2 soaked figures scrambling toward their car under the laughter of my cameras. I leaned back in my chair, watching them retreat on the screen. A small, satisfied smile tugged at my lips. It was petty, maybe, but it was also proof. Karen's empire was cracking. Her threats were clumsy now, desperate. The tide was turning. But as the night quieted, as Sam and I sat together in the calm that followed, I felt the weight pressing harder. Because this wasn't just about embarrassing Karen. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth, and truth has consequences. The trap was set. The Trojan horse was ready. The neighbors were waiting, and Karen Glass had no idea that in just a few days, the stage she loved so much would become the gallows she had built for herself. Storm clouds hung low that morning, the sky gray and heavy like it knew what was coming. The Magnolia Ridge Community Center smelled of folding chairs, weak coffee, and decades of unspoken resentment. But tonight, it felt different. The air buzzed. 50 people filled the room, double the usual turnout. Faces usually blank with resignation now flickered with something else. Expectation. I wore a suit, not for Karen, but for myself. Armor. Sam pressed a kiss to my cheek before I left. "Give them hell," she whispered. Rick was parked down the street in his van, laptop glowing, fingers poised over the keys. He had the live stream ready. Neighbors, media, even the state attorney's office queued to receive our broadcast at the push of a button, and then she walked in. Karen Glass, red blazer, perfect manicure. Smile smug as a knife. She scanned the room, mistaking the crowd's tension for admiration. She thought they were here for her. She didn't realize they were here for her end. She called the meeting to order with her usual condescension, bragging about property values, about enforcing the integrity of Magnolia Ridge, about garden gnomes kept in line and lawns mowed at regulation height. She was basking in her fantasy of control, and I let her. I let her bury herself in arrogance until finally, "Any questions from the floor?" Her eyes landed on me, a shark spotting a minnow. "Yes, Mr. Reyes. I trust you're here to discuss your outstanding liens." I rose slowly, calm, controlled. "Actually, no. I'm here to give a presentation." I held up the thumb drive. "About the HOA's finances. I think the community will find it illuminating." The room rippled with murmurs. Karen's smile faltered. "All presentations must be pre-approved by the board," she snapped, and Then a voice rose from the back. "Derek! Then let's amend the agenda," he shouted, holding up his infamous wind chime fine like a battle flag. "Yeah, let him speak," another neighbor called. "We want to hear it." The dam of fear cracked. For the first time, the neighbors didn't stay silent. Their voices rose together, demanding, insisting. And in that swell of resistance, Karen realized she'd lost control. Her lips thinned. "Fine," she hissed, "but make it quick. I walked to the podium. My hand slid the thumb drive into the laptop. I whispered into my watch, "Rick, we're live." In his van, a single keystroke sent the feed into the world. Every resident's inbox, every local journalist, every office of authority. The show had begun. The first slide lit the screen behind Karen, a copy of my $10,000 fine for noise pollution. Next to it, a video of the specter rolling silently out of my driveway. The only sound, birds singing. The room chuckled, then murmured, then grew quiet. Slide by slide, the house of cards collapsed. Fake landscaping invoices, pool services for pools that didn't exist, each followed by bank records, each trail leading to shell corporations. And finally, every single, one of them leading to the same man, Martin Glass. Gasps shook the room. Phones rose, recording, sharing. Neighbors leaned in, eyes wide. Karen's face drained of color, her smugness evaporating into something pale and brittle. But I wasn't finished. The drone footage appeared. A grainy but undeniable video, Martin's sedan pulling into her driveway. At 2 a.m., night after night, the partial license plate, the registration, the connection. The murmurs became shouts, neighbors pointing at Karen, voices sharp with betrayal, and then the final blow. The audio. Through static and hiss, her voice filled the speakers. "He's not rolling over like the others." And then Martin's cold as ice. "We need that lot. Without it, the EV spa deal falls apart." The room erupted. It wasn't a meeting anymore. It was a mutiny. People surged to their feet, shouting, "Thief! Liar! Criminal!" Derek led the charge, his wind chime fine waving like a declaration of war. Karen sat frozen, eyes wide, mask shattered. The Queen of Magnolia Ridge stripped bare in front of her subjects. Her two compliance officers standing by the door looked at each other, then quietly slipped out, abandoning her. Karen was alone. Her power, her authority, her fear. It all crumbled in an instant. She looked small now, pathetic. And I thought it was over. I thought the war had ended right there. But then my watch buzzed. A message from Rick. Just 6 words. "Dude, I found one more file." My stomach dropped. It's bad, really bad. The crowd was. Roaring, the neighbors chanting, Karen shrinking in her chair. But as I glanced at my phone, a new window opened. A document Rick had just unearthed. And what I read made my blood run cold. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. I thought I had seen it all. The fines, the intimidation, the fake invoices, the conspiracy with her brother. But what flashed on my phone screen that night was worse than anything I had imagined. A geotechnical soil analysis report, stamped, signed, official. And the address on the report? Mine, my property, my home. The summary was chilling in its cold, clinical language. Critical instability due to subterranean spring. Structure recommended for condemnation and demolition. And the date on the report? 3 weeks from now. It was a ghost from the future. A document forged to declare my home unsafe, to condemn it, to erase it. Sam leaned over my shoulder as I scrolled to the last page. And that's where the real horror lived. The signature belonged to a respected geologist, but the seal pressed into the paper, the one that gave the document its authority, was not from a private firm. It was from the Magnolia Ridge City Planning Commission And the co-signing commissioner? A name Rick had found earlier in Martin's business dealings. Commissioner Thompson, not just a bureaucrat. A silent partner in the holding company for the EV spa project. The truth crashed over me like icy water. This wasn't just an HOA war. It wasn't just embezzlement. It wasn't just Karen. This was bigger. A city official. A man with power to sign away homes with the stroke of a pen. A man invested in the project that needed my land. Karen wasn't the mastermind. She was a pawn in a game of real estate greed that reached straight into government, and that was when I saw it. The flicker in Karen's eyes as I looked up from the document. The crowd was still shouting, neighbors still waving phones, but she was smirking. She thought she was still safe, protected, shielded by allies higher up the chain. She thought no matter what I showed tonight, she had an ace in the hole. That forged document. That commissioner's seal. But she had underestimated one thing. I wasn't afraid anymore. I raised my hand, and the crowd quieted just enough. They were looking at me now, not at her. I had become the voice of their rebellion. And I decided right then that there would be no half measures. "One last thing," I said, my voice steady but sharp enough to cut through the noise. I airdropped the file from my phone to the laptop, and the forged geological report appeared on the projector screen, larger than life. Gasps filled the room as I zoomed in on the words, condemnation, demolition, unsafe structure. Then lower, the seal of the City Planning Commission, and finally, the signature of Commissioner Thompson. "This," I said, my voice cold with fury, "is what they had planned for my home. Not just Karen, not just Martin. A city commissioner, a man sworn to protect this community, signing off on a forged report to destroy my house and build their spa." The room went silent, then louder than ever before. It was no longer a mutiny. It was an uprising. Neighbors weren't just shouting at Karen anymore. They were dialing phones, calling the mayor's office, calling the district attorney, calling news stations whose links Rick had already seeded into their inboxes. This wasn't just HOA drama now. This was corruption, conspiracy, a scandal that stretched beyond our gates into the city itself. Karen's face finally cracked. The smirk dissolved. And for the first time, I saw it, the raw panic of a woman who realized she was no longer protected. She pushed back from the table, knocking over a water pitcher, eyes darting toward the door. The Queen of Magnolia Ridge was now just a cornered animal, desperate to escape. She shoved past Derek, ignoring his triumphant shouts, and stumbled into the overcast afternoon. The crowd followed, spilling into the parking lot, watching as Karen Glass made her last pathetic bid for freedom. 2 police cruisers pulled in, lights flashing. Not the weary officers from before, detectives sent by the DA's office, faces grim and ready. Karen panicked. She spotted an old golf cart near the tennis courts, keys still in the ignition. She leapt in, slammed the accelerator, and tore across the manicured lawn she had lorded over for years. The cart bounced, swerved, ripping up the grass in a trail of destruction that was the perfect metaphor for her reign. Her escape lasted 15 seconds. The cart slammed into the side of a police cruiser with a dull, humiliating thud. Officers strolled over, calm, almost casual, and pulled her from the wreckage. The cuffs clicked shut, and in that moment, cheers erupted. Not polite applause, not nervous chuckles. Cheers. Pure cathartic release. Years of fear and silence exploded into one triumphant roar. Karen Glass, the tyrant of Magnolia Ridge, was finished. But deep in my gut, I knew. This wasn't the end, because Karen wasn't the disease. She was just a symptom. The real sickness was bigger, stronger, and it was, waiting for us outside Magnolia Ridge's gates. The implosion of Karen's empire was swift. Detectives led her away in handcuffs, her red blazer soaked from the rain, her face twisted in disbelief. The woman who had ruled Magnolia Ridge with pink pantsuits and iron fists was now just another criminal shoved into the back of a cruiser. Inside the community center, her board, those silent enablers who had nodded along to every abuse, folded in minutes. Surrounded by furious neighbors, they scribbled their resignations on the back of meeting agendas. The old guard was finished, but the storm didn't stop at our gates. By nightfall, Karen's home, and by extension the HOA office, was sealed with evidence tape. Commissioner Thompson, her hidden shield, was suspended within hours. By the end of the week, he was in custody, his name plastered across every news broadcast. Corruption in Magnolia Ridge, HOA president and city official charged in sweeping. Fraud scandal. The empire they had tried to build on my land had collapsed overnight, and for the first time in months, Magnolia Ridge breathed. The lawsuits against me evaporated. Every fine Karen had levied, against me, against Derek, against the widow with her garden gnome, nullified. The new board, elected in a special meeting, wasn't made of cronies. It was made of survivors, people who had lived under her tyranny and now wanted something better. Their first act was symbolic but powerful. They tore up the old bylaws and rewrote them from scratch. Not for control, for community. And the difference was immediate. Fear was gone. Whispers turned into laughter. Silence turned into conversation. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact now waved with genuine warmth. Barbecues sparked up. Block parties filled the streets. Magnolia Ridge, for the first time, actually looked like the dream it had been sold as. Sam and I sat on our patio one evening, the same patio where we once watched Karen's fake compliance officers stalk our lawn. But now, the only sound was Derek's wind chimes, tinkling happily in the breeze. My phone buzzed. A message from Rick. A news article. Former HOA president and city commissioner indicted in sweeping corruption case. I showed Sam. She smiled, leaned her head on my shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. "You didn't just defend us. You saved the whole neighborhood." I looked out across our quiet street. The oak trees, the trimmed lawns, kids riding bikes, and I realized the answer to the question that had haunted me from the beginning. How far will a man go to defend his own? All the way, not just for his walls, not just for his driveway, but for the very idea of home. Weeks passed. The legal system, finally awake and armed with undeniable evidence, moved faster than I expected. Karen and her brother took plea deals to avoid trial. They would serve time. Thompson lost his office, his career, his reputation. The EV spa project evaporated, its investors scattering like roaches in light. The neighborhood was safe, and slowly, so were we. The tension that had lived in Sam's eyes melted away. We laughed more. We slept better. We even talked about getting that dog we had always wanted. Life returned, not because it had been given, but because we had fought for it, won. Sunny Saturday morning, I rolled the cover off the Spectre in the garage. For the first time in months, I didn't see it as a target. I didn't see it as the spark of a war. I just saw it as what it was, a beautiful machine, a promise, a symbol. Sam joined me, sliding into the passenger seat. Her smile filled the cabin with light. "Where to?" she asked. "Anywhere," I said. And I meant it. We glided down the street, the cobalt blue paint shimmering in the sun. Derek waved from his yard, wind chimes singing behind him. Kids pedaled bikes past, their laughter chasing us like music. For once, Magnolia Ridge felt like what it was always supposed to be, a home. And as we drove, I thought about the lesson burned into me by every sleepless night, every forged fine, every confrontation. You don't need an army to fight a war. You don't need badges or uniforms. Sometimes all you need is the truth, and the will to see it through. Justice isn't always delivered in a courtroom. Sometimes it's delivered on a projector screen in a community hall. Sometimes it's in the sound of handcuffs clicking shut on a tyrant. And sometimes, on a quiet Saturday morning, it's found in the peace of a driveway. Karen thought she had taken everything from me. But in the end, she gave me something instead. A reminder that when you push a good man too far, he doesn't just push back, he pushes. Back with everything, and he wins. You've heard this confession. Now wait until you hear the next one.